Though technology can do this great thing in this moment, it could also be flipped around and used by someone else in a very horrible way.
So Google and Apple have a clever way of encouraging people to install contact tracing apps for COVID-19. Now, the big problem with getting people to adopt these apps is because it's not required, right? This is something they have to elect. They have to opt in for this. And a lot of people, including myself, are a little bit concerned about how deep this goes from a security standpoint. We talked about, Jake, you are not feeling like this is a security issue. Chris, you're not.
I don't have security concerns. Like, what are they gonna find on me other than like where I live, right? And I mean, like, are they gonna come to my home?
Well, yeah, they might. Like, that's the thing.
I'll provide them with a nice steak dinner.
Well, if you're gonna provide steak dinner, I'm coming over.
Yeah, and we're gonna start streaming from your house.
Right.
That's what I mean. There's nothing bad.
So Google and Apple are doing something, and it's interesting the way that they're doing this. They're saying now the security concern and Apple and Google joining forces is something that's like, two big behemoths joining forces. That's monopoly. That's, there's all kinds of issues there. But what they're talking about in this is having something where they work together, where it all networks between whether you have a Google device or an Apple device, and it's built into the software. So like if you get a software update, it's built into the software. Now, you still have to opt in to the options, but what they're tracking is your proximity to other people, and they don't track anything else. That's what they're saying in this article. They're saying for now, right. Now, they say where there's a spot in this article down here, the biggest concern most people have expressed about the collaboration is that it will lead to damaging privacy violations, which is exactly what we're talking about. That's the concern, right? And the one thing that they say, because they asked the question, they said, hey, what about this? It avoids capturing location data and instead records only the proximity of your smartphone to someone else's. For another, I value my own privacy less during a public health emergency. But I think that's potentially the problem, is we're willing to let go of a lot more. And what does that do? And I think that's a lot of people are talking about. I don't know how you guys land. Well, I think I probably can guess how each of you land on the idea of you have to wear masks out. And there's a lot of people that are up in arms. They're taking away our freedom. We can't go to church. Like, there's a lot of this stuff that people are really up in arms about. And I think there are things we need to be concerned about. However, there is some level of, hey, we need to work together, and that might mean we give up a little bit of security. Jake, what do you think about this? I want to get your opinion on this first.
I don't know. Getting, like you said, getting somebody to download an app is going to be extremely difficult. So they're trying to implement it into automatic uploads, like you were saying. So like the Marshmallow or Android 6.0, like that whole deal. The Google Play Store automatically downloads something for you, especially if it's required by Android for you to have it. But one thing that is interesting is there's so many other countries that have started to implement these technological ideas into practice right now to be able to track people's interaction with each other, and they have not seen good results whatsoever.
They have not seen good results in people adopting it.
Well, and not just in people adopting it and it working. Like in China, they remember we did that story a few episodes ago where they had adopted that app that could help you figure out if you're exposed to it. I mean, that's basically the extent to which we've had a technology to do something like this.
Right.
And now Google and Apple are saying that they have a better way to do it, which, I mean, sure, if you're going to be tracking the proximity between two phones and say, oh, I'm sitting next to Chris, but Chris is 8 feet away based on how far our phones are from each other.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's some minor,
how accurate can that be?
Yeah, there's some finesse details that might be difficult. However, if you think about the fact that maybe they make it a 10-foot radius because your phone could be further away than you are, but in the grand scheme of things, we need to figure out some way to track it that isn't manual from an efficiency standpoint. However, at some point you might have it, you might not, because there's so many asymptomatic people. Chris, what do you think about this?
It's hard. I think you kind of mentioned a little bit about like joining together. I think in the face of something like this that we're currently going through, yes, let's band together, let's do the things, we'll wear the masks, even though it's frustrating or it's in the way or whatever. But it's a limited time. eventually there's an end, and we should be able to take them off, shake hands again, get back into community as life was before, maybe even better. Who knows? But I think what's wrong with the technology shifting this way is I feel like in some ways technology changes and that cements a certain behavior in society, because now we're living to the technological advances as opposed to living a certain way and allowing the technology to support it, if that makes sense. Yeah. And so I think we always have to be careful when technology like breaks and trailblazes and creates a new space, we immediately fill it, and then we learn as we go. But a lot of times we need to reserve and think what's going to happen, because I feel like technology is kind of like when you're talking about fighting, whenever you bring a certain weapon into a fight, you have to expect that it could be used against you. And so technology can do this great thing in this moment. It could also be flipped around and used by someone else in a very horrible way. And so I think we need to slow down a little bit and realize that no matter what things we might have that might be good for the moment, we have to at least take a step back and think, how could this be used in a bad way? Not to be like conspiracy theorist or to be whatever, but think a little bit before we move forward, because is it worth the little help now to unleash a greater evil down the road? And if you think about it first, be like, no, that's highly unlikely that's going to happen. In fact, we're going to do this X, Y, Z to make sure that doesn't happen. Okay, fine. At least you thought about it. We move forward. We set up boundaries so that the technology doesn't go into a place where we don't want it to go.
Yeah. Well, and in the article right here, it says some readers have asked me whether the system might be put to other users, such as targeting advertising, or whether non-governmental organizations be access to it. And Apple and Google explicitly said no. So they're thinking about that, and they're working on everything they can to do it. And unfortunately, we can't control anybody other than ourselves. We have to say, okay, at some point we have to trust, we have to have faith that they're going to be using it for the right ways. But this also only communicates. Now, the one thing that is interesting about this idea, and Hallie has a question. She says, what app are we talking about? So it's not an app. Google and Apple are talking about putting something baked into the operating systems on their phones that you have to opt into, but it does a tracking based on proximity. It's not a specific app.
Well, that's also not necessarily true, because they talk about how even if somebody hasn't downloaded the app, they're still able to send alerts to somebody whether or not they're in proximity with someone that they believe has the virus.
Right. The other person would have opted in.
Amber Alert.
Yeah. Which, like you know what? Actually, that's a good point. It's like an Amber Alert. If somebody has opted in because they are positive and they have it, and they're saying, hey, I want people to know so that, it's easy for people to stay away if they want to stay away, blah, 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 whatever. Right. I think that is something that's important. This is something that doesn't exist yet. It will exist on some level, but will it exist before we have another fix?
Well, I think something like this would really could scare people, because you take that, what you just said, it notifies this person might have and stuff like that. It can be fear inducing. And also, like you said, okay, it's not available to certain people, but we don't know who has access to that level of security. If Apple and Google are running it, we're like that. And also, there's these guys called hackers who could eventually get in there and get that information. And who's to say, like I said, precedent, you do this, okay, cool, opt in, whatever like that. Now we have this grid of people and stuff like that. And then later down the road, I'm not saying the people in the store now, but later down the road, there could be somebody who gets to have access to it somehow. Yep. And suddenly they don't like people speaking about a certain thing. Oh, guess what? That person has the virus. Yeah. He doesn't, or she doesn't, but I'm just saying, that's storytelling, as it were. But
because then you get to the point where it's like you're branding a person. Right. And if it's specifically you're branded saying, hey, you have a virus, it's like the Scarlet Letter kind of ideas, I think, where you're going with that. Yeah. But at the same time, it's not a permanent situation unless it is something where you have the worst case scenario and you are in the ICU, and then you got a totally different issue.
And not even talking about 5 years from now, they're like, oh, well, he's got COVID. No. I'm just saying this type of technology right now opens the door for whatever it is later on. That, COVID is an example, so that it's like, they got something that could be potentially dangerous. Let's stay away from them. The public, all they need to know is that person has a thing I don't want. I'm staying away. Look, he's got it. He's right there. Get him. Right. And then now you're being pulled. And you're saying,
but then it depends on who's in control of it. It depends on who's in control of it. Exactly. And I think that's the thing that we have to be careful of, but at some time we have to just say it is what it is. Like that we can't control all the things. Yeah, Jake?
I think the idea that we have the ability to be careful with it is a misnomer. I don't think that we have any control of it. And that's one of the reasons why I'm not fearful of people having my information, because of the fact that Google and Apple are organizations that are built towards what? Building technology. And people want to talk about all these crazy things that they do. That's like they have all this different privacy information and they start to use it. They're using it for their own gain, not necessarily malevolently against a singular person. The people that do that are these hackers that Chris is talking about. But again, that is one person. And that one person that is a hacker, I mean, I don't think that we've had an example up to this point of mass hysteria when it comes to a single hacker or a group of hackers taking in massive amounts of information before they're stopped. I don't like, yeah, we have identity theft and credit card fraud. And those are like the two things that I see as like the massive thing that you're worried about when it comes to people taking your information, or like buying something off of your Amazon, right? Which is like happened to, I think, everybody.
Well, it happened to my father-in-law.
A simple resetting of your password normally takes care of that problem.
And two-factor authentication. There's so many things out there that help against that. I think it's just something where people are weary about it because you're giving more information, and then that just leads towards the socialization and all of that. I mean, if you look at China, I mean, you talk about China, Jake, and the app, like they're a communist country. They're required to take it. They couldn't not take it. That app had to be on their device, whatever it was. Right. They did not have a choice, which is where the concern goes is, you know, are we getting to the place where this is like we are giving up too much freedom? And that's the question, and that's the big fight. And I think that's the thing that we have to balance. And that's why we're not just like we're not just letting everybody control it. There is systems in place where there are checks and balances and questions, right? And we can't control it all. Right. But I think technology, like I've said before, with the environment, I think technology is the answer. On some level, technology is going to fix it because people are too stubborn and selfish to actually have us be the reason that it gets fixed. Like I think something that Andrew Cuomo, the governor of New York, was talking, I guess, yesterday. I didn't see it. Tammy told me about it, saying that people are the reason that the virus is going down because we've done such a good job and we stayed home and we, and I'm like, you know what? A little bit, but that's not the reason. Like there are so many other factors outside of us. Yes, we have a part in it, but there's going to be some sort of technology that takes over and fixes it. And the hospitals with the technology they have are the reason that so many people are coming out of it. But technology is something that is not changing, and it's going to keep going. I mean, it is changing. It's constantly changing, and that's not going to slow down anytime soon.
Its role in our lives is only going to change in a sense of them getting bigger, them getting more prevalent. Because if you don't adapt to the way that technology is going now, you're going to die. You're never going to survive.
100%. You adapt you adapt or die.
Right. It's very much like a Darwinistic way of thinking, but at the same time, there's a lot of truth in that idea of natural selection, right? There's pieces of it that are true. There's pieces of it that aren't. But reality is you have to adapt to be able to go from one place to another. Hallie even asked earlier, I thought monopolies were illegal. Monopolies, a sole ownership of something is illegal, and normally there's government services that will break that up. But when it comes to big tech, right, the reason why it feels like big tech is a monopoly is because of the fact that these guys are the guys that have gone through that natural selection process and continued to be the top of the top, the people that we choose to rely on. And monopolies, so in that sense, I mean, I guess you would say people joining together like this, Google and Apple are still separate companies, so they're still separate endeavors and not making a monopoly. They're working together in a time of a crisis. But what is illegal is killing your family over a game of Monopoly.
That is definitely illegal. But the legality of what is happening here is it's not, we said monopoly, this has nothing to do with a monopoly. This is them working together in partnership to create something that helps us in our current situation. Thanks for checking out the Trending Stories Taking Over show. If you like that video, make sure to hit subscribe and the notification bell so you know whenever we have a new video and you're aware of any of the live streams when we do a full show. You can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, on Spotify, anywhere that you listen to podcasts. Go to tstoshow.com, check it out, or watch one of these other videos over here. You're gonna like it. I have a feeling you're gonna love it.